Hey guys, picture this. You're dragging a block of limestone the size of a family car up a ramp in the blazing desert heat. Your hands are wrapped in strips of old linen that are already soaked through with sticky moisture. The stone dust gets everywhere, in your mouth, up your nose, caking into a gritty paste on your skin. Meanwhile, the foreman's yelling at you because you've stopped for half a second to catch your breath, and the bloke next to you just stepped on your bare foot with his own crusty, swollen heel. Your back feels like it's been twisted into a knot. Your stomach's growling because breakfast was a handful of bread and an onion, and the only thing keeping you going is the promise of more bread and onions at lunch. If you think your morning commute is rough, imagine doing that for 12 hours straight, 6 days a week, until your body gives up or the pyramid's finished, whichever comes first. If you enjoyed that mental image, hit that like button and subscribe for more historical suffering. I'm genuinely curious to know where you're all watching from, so tell me where you're watching from and what time it is right now in the comments below. So let's step into the world of an ancient Egypt pyramid builder and see exactly why you wouldn't last a single week. Let's start with your morning wake-up call, which doesn't involve an alarm clock or a gentle tune from your phone. No, you're getting woken up by the sound of a wooden mallet banging against the doorframe of your mud brick hut. Some bloke whose job is literally to wake everyone up is going down the row of workers' quarters, hammering away like his life depends on it. It's still dark outside. The sun hasn't even thought about rising yet. You're lying on a mat made of woven reeds that's about as comfortable as a gym floor, and you've got a wooden headrest under your neck that's somehow worse than no pillow at all. Your neck's stiff, your shoulders ache, and you've got mysterious bruises all over your ribs from yesterday's work. You crawl out into the pre-dawn darkness and immediately stub your toe on the doorframe because you can't see a thing. That's your morning off to a cracking start. There's no bathroom in your hut. There's barely a hut, to be honest. Just 4 walls, a roof made of palm fronds, and a corner where you keep your one spare tunic and a water jug. You stumble outside to the communal area where there's a long trench dug into the ground. That's your toilet. It's a ditch, shared by about 200 other workers. The stench hits you before you even get close, a thick, eye-watering funk that makes you want to turn around and hold it in until lunchtime. But you can't because you've been holding it since the middle of the night and your bladder's about to explode. You do your business as quickly as possible, trying not to breathe through your nose, and then you shuffle over to the washing area. This is a stone trough filled with water that's been sitting there since yesterday. It's got a thin film of dust on top and a few dead insects floating in it. You splash some on your face and call it a wash. Personal hygiene? Never heard of her. Breakfast is served in a big open courtyard where everyone lines up with their bowls. You get a chunk of bread that's dense and coarse, made from emmer wheat that's been ground with stones. The flour's full of grit because the grinding process leaves tiny bits of stone in it, so every bite feels like you're chewing on sand. You also get a raw onion and a cup of weak beer. Not the kind of beer you'd enjoy on a night out. This stuff tastes like liquid bread that's gone slightly off. It's thick, lumpy and warm, and it sits in your stomach like a brick. But it's got calories, and it's safer than drinking the water straight from the river, so you gulp it down and try not to gag. The onion's your only source of flavour, and it's so strong that your eyes start watering the moment you bite into it. Your breath's going to smell like a dragon's armpit for the rest of the day, but so is everyone else's, so at least you're all in it together. Now it's time to head to the work site, and the walk alone is enough to make you regret every decision that led you here. The pyramid's being built a fair distance from the workers' village, so you've got a trudge of about half an hour in the rapidly heating morning air. You're walking on packed dirt paths that are already dusty, and with hundreds of workers marching in the same direction, you're basically moving in a cloud of fine particles that coat your throat and make you cough every few steps. Your feet are bare because shoes are a luxury you can't afford. The ground's littered with sharp stones, dried out thorns from desert plants, and the occasional dry dropping from the donkeys that haul supplies. You step on something squishy at one point, and you don't look down because you don't want to know. Your soles are so thick with calluses that they're like leather, but even that doesn't stop the occasional sharp jab that makes you wince. When you finally reach the pyramid site, the scale of the thing smacks you in the face. It's massive, it's barely halfway done, and it already looks like a mountain. The bottom layers are in place, great big blocks of limestone stacked up in perfect rows, and there are ramps zigzagging up the sides, so workers can drag more blocks to the top. The noise is unbelievable. There's shouting everywhere, foremen barking orders, workers grunting and yelling as they haul ropes, the scrape and thud of stone on stone, the creak of wooden sledges, the clatter of copper chisels on rock. It's like standing next to a construction site, except 10 times louder, and with no ear protection. Your head's already starting to pound and you haven't even started working yet. Your job for the day is hauling blocks. You're part of a team of about 20 blokes, and your task is to drag a block of limestone from the supply area up one of the ramps to wherever the masons need it. Each block weighs somewhere around 2.5 tons. That's heavier than a car. You're going to move it using ropes, a wooden sledge, and pure muscle. There's no machinery, no pulleys, no clever tricks. Just you and your mates pulling until your shoulders feel like they're going to pop out of their sockets. The ropes are thick and rough, made from twisted plant fibres, and they tear the skin off your palms even through the linen wraps you've got on your hands. By the end of the first hour, your hands are raw and tender, and you've still got 11 hours to go. The heat is the next thing that tries to kill you. The sun comes up fast, and within an hour of starting work, it's already blazing down like someone's pointing a giant magnifying glass at your head. There's no shade. The pyramid's enormous, but it's not finished, so there's no shelter. You're just out in the open, baking. The air shimmers with heat, and the stone under your feet gets so hot, you can feel it through your calluses. You're sweating from every pore, and it's not a light, refreshing sweat. It's the thick, greasy kind that soaks your tunic and drips into your eyes, stinging like mad. Your tunic's just a simple linen rectangle tied at the waist, and it's already plastered to your back and chest. The linen's rough and scratchy, and where it rubs against your skin, you're developing angry red patches that burn with every movement. You're given water breaks, but they're few and far between. There are big clay jars stationed around the site, and when the foreman blows a whistle, yes, they had whistles, little bone ones that make a shrill screech. You drop your rope and stagger over to the nearest jar. You scoop water out with a shared ladle that's been in about 50 other people's mouths already that morning. The water's warm and tastes faintly of clay and algae, but you don't care. You drink until your stomach sloshes, because you don't know when the next break's coming. Then the whistle blows again, and you're back on the rope, hauling and heaving and trying not to pass out. The rhythm of the work is mind-numbing. You pull, you step, you pull, you step. The foreman chants to keep everyone in time, something like heave, step, and if you fall out of rhythm, the whole team stumbles and the block stops moving. If the block stops moving, the foreman starts yelling. He's got a stick, and he's not shy about using it to whack the nearest person if he thinks they're slacking. You've been whacked twice already this week, once on the shoulder and once across the backs of your thighs, and both spots are still tender. So you keep pulling, even when your legs are trembling and your back screaming, and your vision starting to go spotty from the heat. Lunchtime finally arrives, and it's the same as breakfast. Bread, onions and beer. You sit in whatever scrap of shade you can find. usually the shadow of a half-built wall or a stack of blocks, and you shovel the food into your mouth without tasting it. Your hands are shaking from exhaustion, and your jaw aches from chewing the gritty bread. You've got dust in your teeth, in your gums, under your tongue. You try to wash it down with the beer, but it just turns into a gritty paste that coats your mouth. Delicious. Let's talk about the dust, because it deserves its own special mention. Everything at the pyramid site is covered in a fine layer of powdered limestone. When the masons chisel away at the blocks to shape them, they create clouds of white dust that drift across the entire site. It gets in your hair, your ears, your nostrils, and worst of all, your lungs. You're constantly coughing, trying to clear your throat, but it doesn't help. The dust just keeps coming. By midday, you look like a ghost. Your skin's coated in white powder, your tunic's gone from beige to pale grey, and when you spit, which you do frequently, it comes out as a thick, chalky paste. You've seen older workers who've been doing this for years, and they've got a permanent rasp in their breathing. Some of them cough so hard they double over and can't work for several minutes. That's going to be you in a few years if you keep this up. The tools you're working with are basic to the point of comedy. The sledges that the blocks sit on are just wooden platforms with runners, like a giant sled. They're heavy, they splinter constantly, and they have to be replaced every few weeks because they wear out. The ropes are thick and strong, but they fray and snap without warning. When a rope snaps under tension, it whips back like a giant elastic band and can take someone's eye out. You've seen it happen. The poor bloke was hauling away, the rope gave out, and the end of it lashed across his face. He was led away clutching his head, and you didn't see him again. You try not to think about that every time you grip the rope, but it's hard not to. The ramps are another nightmare. They're built from mud bricks, rubble and sand, sloping up the side of the pyramid at an angle that gets steeper the higher you go. The surface is uneven and crumbly, and it's covered in a layer of wet clay that's supposed to make the sledges slide more easily. In theory, that's clever. In practice, it means you're walking on a slick, slippery surface while hauling a 2-ton block. Your feet slide out from under you constantly. You're gripping the rope so tight your knuckles go white, and you're leaning back with all your weight just to keep the block from sliding backwards and crushing everyone below. The clay squelches under your feet, cold and slimy, and it splashes up onto your shins and the back of your tunic. By the end of the day, you're caked in a mix of limestone dust and wet clay, which dries into a hard crust that pulls at your skin and hair. Let's not forget the foremen, who are a constant source of stress. These are the blokes who've been promoted because they survived long enough to prove they're tough, and now they take out all their frustrations on you. They don't haul blocks. They stand at the top of the ramp or the bottom, watching, shouting, pointing with their sticks. If you slow down, they shout. If you stop to catch your breath, they shout. If you ask for an extra water break, they laugh in your face and tell you to get back to work. Some of them are decent and will turn a blind eye if you take a quick rest behind a stack of blocks, but most of them are miserable sods who seem to enjoy making your life harder. One of them has a voice like a donkey with a throat infection, all harsh and braying, and you can hear him from halfway across the site. You've started to have stress dreams about that voice. The sun moves across the sky with agonizing slowness. You start to measure time by the position of your shadow. When your shadow's short and directly beneath you, it's midday, and you're only halfway through the shift. When it starts to stretch out to the side, you know you've got a few more hours. When it's long and thin, pointing towards the river, you're almost done. Almost. Not quite. There's always one more block to move, one more load to haul. The foremen don't let you leave until the day's quota is met, And some days that means working until the sun's almost set. When you're not hauling blocks up ramps, you're doing other jobs that are just as backbreaking. Sometimes you're tasked with levering blocks into position using wooden beams. You jam the beam under the edge of a block and push down with all your weight, trying to shift a 2-ton lump of rock by a few centimeters. It's like trying to move a house by leaning on it. The wood bends and creaks alarmingly, and you're always half expecting it to snap and send you sprawling. Other times you're on sledge duty, which means you're one of the blokes pulling the sledge while others push from behind. The people pushing have it even worse than you, because they're bent over, shoving at the back of the block with their shoulders, and they're taking the full brunt of the weight if it starts to slide backwards. Then there are the days when you're sent to the quarry, and those are somehow even worse than working at the pyramid. The quarry's a massive pit carved into the limestone bedrock, and it's where the blocks are cut out of the living rock. The workers there use copper chisels and wooden mallets to hammer out channels around each block. Then they drive wooden wedges into the channels and soak them with water. The wood expands, the rock splits, and eventually the block comes free. It's slow, brutal work, and the noise is incredible. Imagine 100 people hammering on metal all at once, the clang echoing off the stone walls of the quarry. You're doing the same motion over and over. Lift the mallet, swing, strike the chisel, repeat. Your shoulders burn, your elbows ache, and your ears ring with a constant clanging. And the dust down in the quarry is even worse than at the pyramid site, because there's no breeze to blow it away. It just hangs in the air like fog, choking and blinding you. If you're really unlucky, you get assigned to rubble duty. After the masons finish shaping a block, there's a pile of limestone chips and dust left over. Someone's got to clear that away, and that someone is you. You're given a basket made of woven reeds, and you scoop up the rubble and haul it to a dump site. The basket's rough and scratchy, it digs into your shoulder, and it's heavy enough that you're staggering by the time you reach the dump. You tip it out, trudge back, fill it again, and repeat. All day. It's mind-numbing, back-breaking, and utterly thankless. Another job you might get stuck with is water duty. This sounds easy. Just carry water to the work teams, right? Wrong. The water's kept in huge clay jars that are stored at the bottom of the site, near the supply area. Your job is to fill a smaller jar, hoist it onto your shoulder, and carry it up the ramps to wherever it's needed. The jars are heavy, awkward, and slippery with condensation. If you drop one, it shatters. You lose the water, and the foreman gives you a piece of his mind and possibly a whack with his stick. You're walking up and down those ramps all day, your shoulder bruised and aching from the weight of the jar, your feet slipping on the clay, your mouth dry even though you're surrounded by water that you're not allowed to drink until your shift's over. Let's talk about injuries, because they're unavoidable. Even if you're careful, even if you do everything right, something's going to hurt you. Maybe it's a splinter from a wooden sledge that goes deep into your palm and festers. Maybe it's a twisted ankle from slipping on the ramp. Maybe it's a pulled muscle in your back from hauling a rope. Maybe it's a smashed finger from a block shifting unexpectedly. There's no health and safety here. There's no first aid station. If you get hurt, you wrap it up with a strip of linen, or one of the older workers might smear some honey on it if it's really bad, and then you get back to work. If you can't work, you don't get fed. Simple as that. So you work through the pain, gritting your teeth and trying not to cry, because crying's not going to help and it'll just make the other blokes think you're soft. By the time the workday finally ends, you're a wreck. The foreman blows the whistle for the last time, and you drop the rope like it's on fire. Your hands are numb, your arms feel like dead weight, and your legs are trembling so badly you nearly collapse. You stand there for a moment, swaying, trying to remember how to walk. Around you, the other workers are doing the same. Some are stretching, some are groaning, some are just sitting down right there on the ramp because they can't take another step. Eventually, you peel yourself away from the work site and start the long trudge back to the workers' village. The walk that seemed tolerable this morning now feels like climbing a mountain. Every step is an effort. Your feet are swollen and tender, and you're pretty sure you've got blisters on top of blisters. When you finally reach your hut, you collapse onto your reed mat and just lie there. You're too tired to move, too tired to think, too tired to care that you're still covered in dust and clay and dried perspiration. Your whole body aches. Your shoulders feel like someone's been beating them with a club. Your back's seized up, and when you try to roll over, a sharp pain shoots down your spine that makes you gasp. Your hands are the worst. They're raw, swollen and throbbing. You try to flex your fingers and they barely move. You're going to have to do this all over again tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that. Dinner's served in the communal courtyard again, and you drag yourself there because you need the food, even though you're too exhausted to enjoy it. Tonight's menu is lentil stew, which sounds alright until you actually taste it. It's a watery gruel with a few mushy lentils floating in it, seasoned with nothing but salt. There's no meat. Meat's for festival days, and those are few and far between. You get another chunk of bread, another onion, and another cup of beer. You eat mechanically, barely tasting it, and then you shuffle back to your hut. Some of the other workers are sitting around a fire, chatting and laughing, but you can't muster the energy. You just want to lie down and sleep. But sleep doesn't come easily because your body's too worked up. Your muscles are twitching, your joints are aching, and every time you shift position, something new hurts. The reed mat's uncomfortable, the wooden headrest's digging into your neck, and there's a stone or something poking you in the ribs. You toss and turn, trying to find a position that doesn't hurt, but it's impossible. Eventually, exhaustion wins and you drift off, only to be woken what feels like 5 minutes later by the sound of the wooden mallet banging on your doorframe. It's morning again. Time to do it all over. Let's talk about your living conditions, because your hut's not exactly a palace. It's a single room made of mud bricks, with walls that are cracked and crumbling. The roof's made of palm fronds laid over wooden beams, and it leaks when it rains. Not that it rains often in the desert, but when it does, you're in for a treat. Water drips through the roof, turning the dirt floor into slippery mud. Your sleeping mat gets damp, your spare tunic gets soaked, and everything smells like wet earth and mildew for days afterwards. There's no furniture except for a wooden stool that's missing one leg, so it wobbles every time you sit on it. You've got a small oil lamp made of clay, but oil's expensive, so you only light it when you absolutely have to. Most evenings, you're sitting in the dark because you can't afford to waste oil. The hut's shared with 2 other workers, which means privacy's a fantasy. You're all crammed into this tiny space, sleeping side by side on your mats. One of your hutmates snores like a congested donkey, a rattling, wheezing sound that goes on all night. The other one's got a chronic cough from all the limestone dust, and he hacks and splutters for hours. You're losing your mind from lack of sleep, but there's nowhere else to go. You've tried sleeping outside, but the desert gets freezing at night, and you woke up shivering so hard your teeth were chattering. So you're stuck in the hut, listening to the symphony of snores and coughs, wondering how you ended up here. There's no storage space, so all your belongings are just piled in a corner. You've got your spare tunic, a pair of sandals that are falling apart, a comb made of wood that's missing half its teeth, and a small clay pot where you keep a bit of salt and some dried fish. That's it. That's everything you own. The dried fish is supposed to be a treat, something to add flavour to your meals, but it's been sitting in the pot for weeks and it's started to smell funky. Not rotten exactly, but not fresh either. You ate a bit of it the other day and spent the next hour burping up fishy fumes that made your eyes water. The workers' village is a sprawling mess of identical mud brick huts arranged in rows. It's crowded, noisy, and smells like a mixture of cooking fires, latrines, and unwashed bodies. There's a communal oven where bread's baked, and the area around it's always thick with smoke. The smoke gets in your eyes and makes them stream, and it clings to your tunic so you smell like a chimney for the rest of the day. There's a well in the centre of the village where you can draw water, but there's always a queue. You stand there with your jug, shuffling forward one step at a time while the sun beats down and flies buzz around your head. When you finally get to the front, you lower your jug into the well and haul it back up, trying not to spill any because that's your drinking and washing water for the day. Washing's a rudimentary affair. There's no bathhouse, no hot water, no soap. You pour a bit of water over yourself, scrub at the worst of the grime with your hands, and call it done. The water's cold, even in the middle of the day, and it doesn't do much to shift the ingrained dirt. You've got a permanent tan line from your tunic, and the parts of your skin that are exposed to the sun are several shades darker than the bits that aren't. Your feet are black with dirt, your fingernails are cracked and packed with grime, and your hair's a matted, dusty mess. You try to comb it occasionally, but the wooden comb just gets stuck, so you usually give up and tie it back with a bit of string. Let's talk about the food in more detail, because it's one of the few things you've got to look forward to, and it's still terrible. The bread's the staple, and it's made fresh every day in the communal oven. The bakers are up before dawn, kneading dough and shaping loaves. The bread comes out dense and heavy, with a thick crust that's almost charred in places. The inside's chewy and full of grit from the stone-ground flour. Eating it is like chewing on a sandy sponge. Your teeth wear down over time from all the grit, and older workers have teeth that are ground almost flat. You're already noticing that your molars don't quite meet the way they used to. The onions are raw and pungent, and they're your only vegetable most days. Sometimes you get a handful of garlic cloves instead, which are even stronger. The beer's made from barley or emmer wheat, and it's thick and lumpy with bits of grain floating in it. It's more like alcoholic porridge than beer. It's nutritious though, and it keeps you going through the day. The alcohol content's low enough that you're not getting drunk, just slightly fuzzy around the edges. You've got a permanent low-level headache from dehydration and malnutrition, and the beer doesn't help. Occasionally, there's a festival day when you get something special. Maybe it's a roasted duck, or a bit of goat meat, or some fresh dates. Those days are like a dream. You savour every bite, chewing slowly, trying to make it last. The meat's greasy and rich, and your stomach's not used to it, so you often end up with indigestion afterwards. But it's worth it for the brief moment of pleasure. The dates are sweet and sticky, a burst of flavour after weeks of bland bread and onions. You hoard a few in your clay pot, eating them one by one over the following days, until they start to ferment and get a bit fizzy. Let's talk about the other workers, because you're surrounded by them all day and they're a mixed bunch. Some of them are decent blokes who'll share their water, or help you haul a particularly heavy load. Others are miserable sods who'll trip you on the ramp or steal your bread when you're not looking. There's a hierarchy, even among the workers. The ones who've been here longest get the slightly less back-breaking jobs, like guiding the blocks into place or working as rope handlers. The new arrivals get the worst tasks, and you're still relatively new, so you're stuck hauling and scraping and doing whatever no one else wants to do. There's one bloke in your work gang who's built like an ox, all broad shoulders and thick arms, and he does the work of 3 men. He barely speaks, just grunts and nods, and he's got a permanent scowl on his face. You're a bit intimidated by him, but he's never given you any trouble. There's another bloke who never stops complaining. He moans about the heat, the food, the foreman, the work, the dust, everything. You want to tell him to shut up, but you're too tired to bother, and besides, he's not wrong. Then there's the joker, the bloke who's always cracking wise and making light of the situation. He's the one who started the belching competition at lunch, and he's got a seemingly endless supply of terrible jokes. Some of them are so bad you groan, but they break up the monotony, and you're grateful for that. There's a sense of camaraderie among the workers, born out of shared suffering. You're all in this together, all hauling the same blocks, all eating the same terrible food, all collapsing in exhaustion at the end of the day. When someone gets injured, the others help them out. When someone's struggling, you adjust the team so they can take a breather. You don't talk about it. There's no grand speeches about teamwork or solidarity. You just do it, because that's what gets you through. But there's also tension. Tempers flare in the heat. Someone bumps into you, or steps on your foot, or takes too long at the water jar, and suddenly there's shouting and shoving. Fights break out occasionally, usually in the evenings when everyone's exhausted and irritable. The overseers break them up quickly, because they can't afford to have workers too injured to labour. The fighters get a tongue lashing and sometimes a whack with a stick, and then it's over. You try to stay out of it, keeping your head down and your mouth shut. Now, let's talk about the toilets again, because they're a constant source of misery. The communal latrine trench is dug at the edge of the workers' village, as far from the huts as possible, but it's still not far enough. The stench drifts over the whole area, especially in the heat of the day. The trench fills up quickly with 200 workers using it, and every few weeks a team of unlucky souls has to dig a new trench and fill in the old one. You pray daily that you're not assigned to that task. The workers who do get stuck with it are a sorry sight, walking around afterwards with a haunted look in their eyes and a stink that clings to them for days. There's no toilet paper, obviously. You use whatever's available: a handful of sand, a smooth stone, a scrap of old linen. It's not pleasant, and it's not effective, and you're often left feeling grimy and uncomfortable. The irritation from the sand and rough cloth leads to rashes and sore spots that make sitting down or bending over an ordeal. You walk stiffly, trying not to aggravate the raw patches, and you're not alone. Half the workers are walking like they've got something stuck where the sun doesn't shine. Let's talk about the insects, because the desert's full of them, and they're all determined to make your life miserable. There are flies everywhere, big, buzzing, persistent flies that land on your face, your food, your hands. You wave them away and they just circle around and land again. They're attracted to the moisture around your eyes and mouth, and they crawl over your skin, tickling and irritating. You swat at them constantly, but it's a losing battle. There are also mosquitoes, especially near the river. They whine in your ears at night and bite any exposed skin. You wake up covered in itchy welts, and scratching them only makes them worse. The itching's maddening, a constant background distraction that you can't escape. Then there are the scorpions. The desert's full of them, and they like to hide in cool, dark places, like under your sleeping mat, or in the corner of your hut, or inside your sandals. You've learned to shake out your sandals before putting them on, and to check your mat before lying down, but occasionally one slips through. You've been stung once on the foot, and it was one of the most painful experiences of your life. Your foot swelled up to twice its normal size, and the pain was a white-hot burning that radiated up your leg. You couldn't walk for 2 days, and you were docked rations for not working. You're terrified of scorpions now, and you check everything obsessively. There are also fleas, lots of them. They live in the reed mats, in your tunic, in your hair. They bite constantly, leaving little red bumps that itch like mad. You scratch until you're raw, and sometimes the bites get infected and turn into painful weeping sores. There's no way to get rid of the fleas completely. You can shake out your mat, you can wash your tunic, but they always come back. The village is infested, and there's nothing you can do about it. Let's talk about the heat some more, because it really is relentless. During the hottest part of the day, the air itself feels like it's burning. You're breathing in hot, dry air that seems to suck the moisture out of your lungs. Your lips crack and bleed. Your skin's dry and flaky, peeling off in strips. You're thirsty all the time, a desperate throat-closing thirst that the warm, algae-tasting water barely touches. You fantasize about cold drinks, about ice, about jumping into a cool river. But the river's far away, and even if you could get to it, you wouldn't be allowed to take a break for swimming. The river's also full of crocodiles, so swimming's not really an option anyway. The sun's so bright you're constantly squinting. Your eyes ache from the glare reflecting off the white limestone. You've got a permanent headache that pounds behind your eyes, and no amount of water or rest seems to help. Some of the older workers have gone partially blind from years of working in the glare. Their eyes are cloudy and unfocused, and they stumble around, relying on the other workers to guide them. That's your future, if you stay here long enough. At night, the temperature drops dramatically. The desert doesn't hold heat, so as soon as the sun sets, it gets cold. You're still in your damp, sweat-soaked tunic, and now you're shivering. You huddle on your mat, trying to conserve warmth, but the thin linen doesn't provide much insulation. You curl up in a ball, arms wrapped around yourself, teeth chattering. You'd light your oil lamp for warmth, but you've already used up your oil for the week. So you just lie there, freezing, waiting for dawn when you can start sweating again. Let's talk about the drinking water, because it's a whole issue on its own. The water comes from the river, which sounds nice until you remember that the river's also where people wash, where animals drink, where fish live and die, and where all sorts of unpleasant things end up. The water's drawn into big clay jars and left to settle so the sediment sinks to the bottom. Then it's distributed to the workers. But even after settling, the water's still murky and has a funky taste. It's been sitting in clay jars in the sun, so it's warm and slightly stagnant. Sometimes you can see little wrigglers in it, mosquito larvae or other tiny creatures. You try not to think about it and just drink because the alternative is dying of thirst. Now let's talk about the animals you encounter, because they're a big part of life on the pyramid site. There are donkeys everywhere, used for hauling supplies. They're stubborn, smelly creatures with a tendency to kick when they're annoyed. You've learned to give them a wide berth, but sometimes you're assigned to work with them, leading them along the supply routes or loading them up with baskets of rubble. The donkeys bray constantly, a harsh, grating sound that sets your teeth on edge. They also produce prodigious amounts of droppings, which get trampled into the paths and create a sticky, reeking mess. You're constantly stepping in it, and the smell clings to your feet. There are also oxen, used for heavier hauling. They're massive, powerful animals, but they're slow and dim-witted. You're tasked with guiding them sometimes, walking alongside with a stick, tapping their flanks to keep them moving. The oxen plod along, breathing heavily, and they're covered in flies that swarm around their eyes and nostrils. The flies then swarm over to you, and you spend half the time swatting them away from your own face. The oxen also have a distinctive musty smell, a mix of sweat, manure and straw, and it's so strong it makes your eyes water. The site's also home to various desert creatures that wander in looking for food or shade. Lizards scuttle across the hot stones, their tiny feet making a scratching sound. They're harmless, but they startle you when they dart out from under a block. There are also snakes, and those are not harmless. You've been warned to watch where you step, because some of the snakes are venomous. You've seen a worker get bitten, and it wasn't pretty. His leg swelled up, he started sweating and shaking, and he had to be carried away. You don't know if he survived. Birds circle overhead, vultures and kites waiting for something to die. It's not a comforting sight. They glide on the thermals, high above the pyramid, their shadows drifting across the ground. Sometimes they land on the blocks, perching and watching with beady eyes. They're scavengers, and they're patient. You try not to think about what they're waiting for. Let's talk about the social hierarchy, because even in the workers' village, there's a pecking order. At the top are the skilled craftsmen, the masons, the carpenters, the engineers. They're the ones who actually know how to build a pyramid, and they're treated with a bit more respect. They get better rations, slightly nicer quarters, and they don't have to do the brutal hauling work. You envy them, but you also know you'll never be one of them. That takes years of training and a level of skill you don't have. Below the craftsmen are the foremen and overseers. They're the ones cracking the whip, keeping everyone in line. They're not well liked, but they're necessary, and they know it. They strut around with their sticks and their loud voices, lording it over the rest of you. Some of them are fair, some are tyrants, and you've learned to read their moods and stay out of their way when they're in a temper. Then there are the regular workers, the haulers, the diggers, the basket carriers. That's you. You're at the bottom of the heap, doing the hardest, most dangerous work for the least reward. There's no upward mobility. You're not going to work your way up to foreman or craftsman. You're going to haul blocks until your body gives out, and then you'll be replaced by some other poor sod. Below, even the workers are the convicts and prisoners, and you're grateful you're not one of them. They're the ones assigned to the absolute worst tasks, clearing the latrines, hauling rubble in the blazing sun with no breaks, digging foundations in the hardest rock. They're chained together sometimes so they can't run away, and they're watched constantly by guards with sticks and whips. You see them occasionally shuffling past in their chains, and you avert your eyes. There, but for the grace of the gods, go you. Now let's talk about the daily rhythm of life, because it becomes a mind-numbing routine. You wake up at dawn, you eat bread and onions, you haul blocks until midday, you eat more bread and onions, you haul more blocks until evening, you eat lentil stew, and you collapse onto your mat. Repeat. Every day is the same. The only variation is which part of your body hurts the most. Monday, it's your shoulders. Tuesday, it's your back. Wednesday, it's your hands. Thursday, your legs are trembling so badly you can barely stand. Friday, you've got a headache that won't quit. Saturday, your feet are a mass of blisters. And then it's back to Monday and your shoulders again. There's one day off per week, and you spend it lying on your mat, too exhausted to move. You should probably do something productive, mend your tunic, wash your spare clothes, sharpen your eating knife. But you can't muster the energy. You just lie there, staring at the cracked ceiling, listening to the sounds of the village. Some of the workers use their day off to socialize, sitting around and talking, playing simple games with pebbles or sticks. You can't be bothered. You just want to sleep. The only thing that breaks the monotony is the occasional festival. These are tied to the agricultural calendar or religious events, and they mean a day off work and better food. There's music and dancing, and the workers let loose, drinking more beer than usual and laughing and singing. You participate half-heartedly because you're too tired to really enjoy it, but it's nice to see everyone relaxed for once. The food's the highlight. Roasted meat, fresh bread, dates, figs, maybe even some honey cakes. You eat until your stomach aches, because you don't know when you'll get food like this again. Let's talk about the smell of the place, because it's inescapable. The pyramid site smells like dust, sweat, and animal droppings. The workers' village smells like smoke, latrines, and unwashed bodies. Your own hut smells like damp linen, mildew, and the musty odour of too many people in too small a space. You've become nose blind to most of it, but every now and then you catch a whiff of something particularly foul, and it makes you gag. The latrine trench on a hot day is a special kind of horror, a thick, cloying stench that coats the back of your throat and makes you retch. The animal pens where the donkeys and oxen are kept overnight are almost as bad, a pungent mix of manure and rotting straw. Your own body odour's not great either. You sweat all day, the sweat mixes with dust and clay, and it dries into a crust on your skin. You can't wash properly, so the smell just builds up. Your tunic's stiff with dried perspiration, and it reeks. You've stopped noticing your own stink, but you notice everyone else's. The close quarters in the work gangs mean you're constantly surrounded by the smell of other people's bodies. Sour, sharp, and unavoidable. The beer breath from everyone drinking all day adds another layer, a yeasty, fermented funk that hangs in the air. Let's talk about your feet, because they deserve special mention. They're calloused and cracked, with thick, leathery soles that are almost like shoes. But even with all that toughness, they still hurt. You've got blisters between your toes, cracks in your heels that sometimes split and are tender to walk on, and a constant ache in your arches from walking on uneven ground all day. Your toenails are thick and yellowed, and one of them's gone black from being stepped on. You're pretty sure you're going to lose that nail eventually. Your feet are also filthy, caked in layers of dirt that no amount of washing will shift. They're so dirty that the original colour of your skin's just a memory. At night, your feet throb and burn, and you can't get comfortable. You try elevating them, you try massaging them, but nothing helps. You just have to wait for the pain to fade enough that you can fall asleep. And then in the morning, you jam them back into your broken sandals and do it all over again. Let's talk about your clothing, because it's minimal and not very effective. You've got one tunic that you wear every day, and a spare that's in slightly better condition for when you manage to wash the first one. The tunic's just a rectangle of linen with a hole for your head, tied at the waist with a cord. It's coarse and scratchy, and it chafes against your skin wherever it rubs, under your arms, around your neck, across your shoulders. The constant friction creates raw patches that sting when you sweat, which is always. The linen's supposed to be light and breathable, good for the hot climate, but when it's soaked with perspiration, it clings to you in a clammy, uncomfortable way. It never fully dries out because you're sweating again before it has a chance to air. So you're walking around in a perpetually damp tunic that smells like a wet animal. When you do manage to wash it, which involves dunking it in a trough of water and wringing it out, it takes ages to dry in the desert air, and by the time you put it back on, it's stiff as a board and even scratchier than before. You've got no undergarments. The concept doesn't exist. So your tunic's rubbing directly against your skin all day, in places that really don't appreciate the friction. You develop rashes in uncomfortable locations, red and irritated spots that make walking and sitting a constant exercise in wincing. There's no cream, no soothing ointment, nothing to help. You just have to endure it and hope it doesn't get infected. Some of the workers wear a loincloth instead of a tunic, just a strip of linen wrapped around the waist and between the legs. It's even more minimal, but at least it doesn't cling when you sweat. You've thought about switching, but you're worried about sunburn in new and exciting places, so you stick with your tunic. The sun's brutal on exposed skin. You've seen workers whose shoulders and backs are blistered and peeling, the skin coming off in sheets. It looks agonizing, and you're careful to keep covered as much as possible, even though it means sweltering in your damp linen. Let's talk about your hair, because it's a constant source of annoyance. It's long, because there's no regular haircuts, and it's matted with dust, sweat, and clay. You tie it back with a piece of string to keep it out of your face, but strands are always escaping and sticking to your forehead and neck. It itches constantly, and when you scratch, your fingernails come away coated in grime. You've thought about just shaving it all off, which some workers do, but you've seen the shaving implements, bronze razors that are about as sharp as a butter knife, and you're not keen on the idea of scraping one of those across your scalp. Your beard's in a similar state if you've got one. It's scraggly and full of dust, and it itches like mad. Some workers keep their beards trimmed, but again, the tools are primitive and the results are patchy. You've seen blokes with nicks and cuts all over their faces from a bad shave, so you just let it grow and deal with the itch. Now let's talk about the mental toll, because it's not just your body that's suffering. The work is mind-numbingly repetitive. Pull the rope, step forward, pull the rope, step forward. Hour after hour, day after day. Your mind goes numb. You stop thinking, stop feeling, and just go through the motions like a machine. It's a strange kind of exhaustion, where you're so bored and so tired that you can't even form proper thoughts. You just exist, moving from one task to the next, waiting for the day to end. There's no mental stimulation, no books, no writing, no conversation beyond the basic grunts and shouts needed to coordinate the work. Most of the workers are illiterate anyway, and even if you could read, there's nothing to read. You can't even daydream properly, because you have to stay focused on the task at hand. If you lose concentration for a second, you might drop the rope, or slip on the ramp, or get hit by a swinging block. So you keep your mind blank and your body moving, and you try not to think about how many more years you're going to be doing this. The isolation's hard too, even though you're surrounded by people. You're too tired to have meaningful conversations. The other workers are just as exhausted as you, and everyone's too worn down to bother with small talk. You eat in silence, you work in coordinated grunts, and you sleep without saying goodnight. There's a loneliness to it, a sense of being utterly alone even in a crowd. You think about home sometimes, wherever that was before you ended up here. Maybe you had a family, a small plot of land, a life that wasn't this. But the memories are getting hazy, worn down by the relentless grind of daily survival. You can't afford to dwell on the past, because it just makes the present more unbearable. So you push those thoughts away and focus on getting through the day. Let's talk about the nights when you can't sleep, which are frequent. You're exhausted, but your body's too wound up to relax. Your muscles twitch and spasm, phantom pains shooting through your limbs. You lie on your mat, staring at the darkness, listening to the snores and coughs of your hutmates. Your mind races with anxious thoughts. Will you be able to keep up tomorrow? Will you get injured? Will you get sick? Will you survive another week, another month, another year? The anxiety builds until your heart's pounding and you're wide awake, even though you desperately need sleep. When you do finally drift off, your sleep's not restful. You have strange, feverish dreams about hauling blocks that never reach the top of the pyramid, about ramps that stretch on forever, about foremen with voices like thunder. You wake up feeling more tired than when you went to bed, your jaw aching from clenching your teeth, your fists clench so tight your nails have left marks in your palms. Let's talk about the lack of privacy. You're never alone. Not when you're working, not when you're eating, not when you're sleeping, not even when you're using the latrine. There's always someone there, always eyes on you, always noise and movement and bodies pressed close. You can't escape it. There's nowhere to go for a moment of peace and quiet. Even on your day off, the village is packed and noisy. People everywhere, children running around. Wait, no, scratch that, no children. Just adults, milling about, talking, arguing, making noise. You fantasize about silence, about being alone, about having a space that's just yours. But it's not going to happen. The lack of personal space wears you down in ways you didn't expect. You're constantly being jostled, bumped, touched. Sweaty bodies pressed against yours in the work gang. Elbows in your ribs as you queue for food. Someone's foot in your face as they shift in their sleep. You start to crave distance, but there's no distance to be had. You're packed in like sardines and you just have to get used to it. Let's talk about the hopelessness of it all. There's no end in sight. The pyramid's going to take decades to build, and you're not going to live long enough to see it finished. Your body's going to give out long before that. You'll haul blocks until your back breaks, or your heart gives out, and then you'll be buried in an unmarked grave somewhere in the desert, and another worker will take your place. That's your future. There's no retirement, no pension, no quiet old age. Just work until you drop. Some workers accept this with a kind of grim resignation. They shrug and say it's the will of the gods, or that it's an honor to build something so grand. You're not convinced. Honor doesn't fill your belly or ease your aching muscles. You're not building the pyramid for glory. You're doing it because you have no other choice. It's this, or starve, and starving seems worse, though some days you're not sure. Let's talk about the supervisors and officials who occasionally visit the site, because they're a whole different level of annoyance. These are the well-fed, well-dressed men who arrive on litters, carried by servants, inspecting the progress of the pyramid. They stroll around in their clean linen kilts and fancy jewellery, pointing at things and making comments while you're sweating and straining nearby. They don't lift a finger. They just observe, make notes on papyrus scrolls, and then leave. You hate them with a quiet, burning intensity. When the officials visit, the foremen get extra shouty and twitchy because they want everything to look perfect. So you're driven even harder than usual, hauling faster, working longer. Also, some pampered bureaucrat can nod approvingly and report back that the project's on schedule. The officials never acknowledge you. To them, you're just part of the machinery, as interchangeable as the blocks you're hauling. If you dropped lifeless tomorrow, they'd just make a note of it and move on. Sometimes the officials bring guests, nobles, or foreign dignitaries who want to see the marvel being constructed. They point and exclaim, marveling at the scale and ambition of it all, and you want to scream at them that there's nothing marvellous about breaking your back for a glorified tomb. But you don't, because that would get you whipped or worse, so you just keep hauling and pretend they don't exist. Now let's talk about the tools you use, because they're as basic as they come. The ropes are made from twisted papyrus or flax fibres, thick and rough. They're strong, but they fray and develop weak spots, and when they break, they do so suddenly and without warning. You've learned to inspect your section of rope before each haul, running your hands along it to feel for worn patches. But even with careful checking, breaks happen, and when they do, chaos ensues. The wooden sledges are constantly splintering and breaking. The runners wear down from being dragged over stone and clay, and they have to be replaced regularly. When a sledge breaks mid-haul, the block can shift or tip, and that's when people get hurt. You've seen a sledge collapse under the weight of a block, the wood exploding into shards, and the block tipping to one side and nearly crushing the workers beside it. It took half an hour to get things stabilized and the block onto a new sledge, and the foreman was apoplectic with rage the whole time. The levers used to position blocks are long wooden beams, thick and heavy. You jam one end under the block and push down on the other end, using your body weight to shift the stone. It's precarious and exhausting, and the levers sometimes crack under the strain. When a lever snaps, you go sprawling, and the block drops back into place with a thud that you feel through the ground. Then you have to fetch another lever and start over. The copper chisels used in the quarry are better than stone tools, but not by much. Copper's soft, so the chisels dull quickly and have to be resharpened constantly. There's a worker whose sole job is sitting with a grinding stone, sharpening chisels all day. The sound of metal on stone is a constant background screech that sets your teeth on edge. Even with sharp chisels, cutting through limestone is slow, painstaking work, and your arms feel like they're going to fall off after a few hours of hammering. Let's talk about the logistics of the whole operation, because it's staggering when you think about it. There are thousands of workers on this site, all needing to be fed, housed and supplied with tools. There are supply lines stretching back to the quarries and the river, with donkeys and boats bringing in stone, food, water and materials. There are bakeries producing thousands of loaves of bread every day, breweries churning out vats of beer, storage facilities keeping everything organized. It's a massive operation, and you're just a tiny cog in a huge machine. The coordination required is mind-boggling. There are teams hauling blocks, teams shaping blocks, teams laying blocks, teams building ramps, teams clearing rubble, teams fetching water, teams cooking food. Everyone has a role, and if one team falls behind, it creates a bottleneck that affects everyone else. So there's constant pressure to keep moving, keep working, keep up with the schedule. There are scribes everywhere, keeping track of everything. They sit in the shade with their papyrus and ink, making tally marks, recording deliveries, noting which teams moved how many blocks. The scribes are literate, educated men, and they look down on the manual labourers with barely concealed contempt. You're illiterate, so the marks they make are just meaningless squiggles to you, but you know they're important. Those records determine whether you get fed, whether your team's meeting its quota, whether the whole project's on track. Let's talk about the occasional rewards, because they do happen, and they're pathetically small, but still something to look forward to. If your team moves more blocks than expected, you might get an extra ration of beer. If the project hits a milestone, like finishing a layer of the pyramid, there might be a small celebration with better food. These moments are rare, but they break up the monotony and give you something to hope for. Once your team was given a day off after moving a particularly massive block that had been causing problems for weeks. It was a beast, heavier than usual, and it took 3 teams working together to haul it up the ramp. When it finally slid into place, there was a ragged cheer, and the foreman announced you'd all earned a rest. You spent the day lying in the shade, doing absolutely nothing, and it was glorious. Your body still ached, but you weren't making it worse, and that felt like a luxury. Let's talk about the futility of complaining. There's no point. Who would you complain to? The foremen don't care. The officials don't care. The gods, if they exist, certainly don't seem to care. So you keep your mouth shut and your head down and just get on with it. Complaining just makes you a target for abuse, and it doesn't change anything. The pyramid's going to be built whether you like it or not, and your feelings on the matter are utterly irrelevant. Some workers tried to run away once. They waited until nightfall, sneaked out of the village, and headed for the river, planning to steal a boat and disappear. They were caught within 2 days, brought back, and whipped in front of everyone as a warning. Then they were sent to the quarry to work in chains. You haven't seen them since. The message was clear. You're here until the job's done, or you're dead. There's no escape. Now let's talk about the rare moments of beauty, because even in this hell there are occasional glimpses of something worth seeing. Sometimes at dawn the light hits the pyramid just right, and it glows golden. the limestone reflecting the first rays of the sun. It's stunning, and for a moment you forget the pain and the exhaustion and just stare. Or sometimes, at night, when you're lying on your mat and you can see the stars through a gap in the roof, you're struck by how clear and bright they are, untainted by any artificial light. The desert sky at night is a blanket of stars, more than you ever knew existed, and it's breathtaking. These moments are fleeting, and they don't make up for the daily suffering, but they're something. They remind you that there's more to the world than hauling blocks and eating onions. Not that it helps much, but it's something. Let's talk about the camaraderie again, because it's worth revisiting. The shared misery creates bonds. You don't talk about it, you don't make grand declarations of friendship, but you look out for each other in small ways. Someone passes you their water when they see you're struggling. Someone takes a bit of the load when you're about to collapse. Someone makes a stupid joke that gets a laugh and lightens the mood for half a second. These small acts of kindness are what get you through. Let's talk about the rainy season, because even though the desert's dry most of the year, there are times when the rains come and they turn the entire site into a nightmare. The rain starts as a blessing, cool water falling from the sky, washing away some of the dust and grime. For about 5 minutes, it's wonderful. Then you realize the problems it causes, and the wonder evaporates faster than the puddles won't. The ramps turn into slick, muddy slides. The clay that was supposed to help the sledges glide becomes a treacherous, slimy mess that offers no traction whatsoever. You're slipping and sliding, trying to keep your footing while hauling a massive block, and it's terrifying. The block slides more easily, which sounds good, but it also means it's harder to control. If it starts to slide backwards, there's no stopping it. You've seen a block get away from a team during the rains, sliding back down the ramp and taking 3 workers with it. They tumbled down in a chaotic heap of limbs and rope, and 2 of them didn't get up. The mud gets everywhere. It's not the clean brown mud you might be imagining. This is clay-heavy, sticky mud that clings to your feet, your legs, your hands. It's cold and clammy, and it weighs you down. Your feet sink into it with every step, and pulling them free takes effort. You're exhausted within an hour, your legs burning from the constant effort of walking through the sucking mud. And when the mud dries, because the sun always comes back, it hardens into a cement-like crust that you have to chip off your skin. The workers' village becomes a swamp. The paths between the huts turn into rivers of muddy water, and your hut's dirt floor becomes a slippery, wet mess. Your reed mat soaks up the moisture and becomes damp and musty, and everything you own gets wet. Your spare tunic's soaked, your sandals are ruined, and there's nowhere dry to sit or lie down. You're cold, wet, and miserable, and there's no way to get warm or dry. The foremen still expect you to work, of course. A bit of rain's not going to stop the project. The rain also brings out swarms of insects. The puddles and damp areas become breeding grounds for mosquitoes, and they descend on the village in clouds. The whining buzz is constant, and the bites are relentless. You're covered in itchy welts, and scratching them only makes it worse. Some of the bites get infected, turning into painful, swollen lumps that ooze when you press on them. There's nothing you can do but endure. Let's talk about the food supply issues that sometimes crop up. The Pyramid Project relies on a steady stream of supplies from the surrounding regions: grain, onions, fish, beer. But sometimes there are disruptions. Maybe the harvest was poor, or there's been a delay in the supply boats, or the officials decided to redirect resources elsewhere. When that happens, rations get cut. You go from barely enough food to not nearly enough. A cut in rations means you're even hungrier than usual, a gnawing, constant hunger that makes your stomach cramp and your head spin. You're trying to do the same back-breaking work on less fuel, and your body starts to break down. You get weaker, more prone to injury, more prone to illness. The foremen don't care. The quotas don't change. You're just expected to work through it. There have been times when the rations were cut so severely that workers started collapsing on the job. The foremen had to relent slightly, giving out extra water and allowing more frequent breaks, but the food shortages continued for weeks. You lost weight you couldn't afford to lose, your ribs started to show, and your face became gaunt and hollow. You looked like a skeleton with skin stretched over it. And you weren't alone. Everyone in the village was in the same state, shuffling around like the walking deceased. Let's talk about the relentless sun again, because it really is the main antagonist of your daily life. It beats down from a cloudless sky, relentless and unforgiving. There's no respite, no shade, no shelter. You're exposed to it for 12 hours a day, and it takes a toll. Your skin's been baked and toughened, dark and leathery from constant exposure. You've got sun damage that's going to cause problems later. Not that you'll live long enough to worry about it. The sun also causes headaches, dizziness and nausea. Heat exhaustion's common, and you've experienced it yourself more than once. Your vision goes blurry, your head pounds, you feel sick to your stomach, and your skin's clammy even though you're overheating. You know you need to cool down and drink water, but there's no time for that. You just have to push through and hope you don't pass out. Some workers do pass out, dropping like stones in the middle of a hall. They're dragged to the shade, doused with water, and left to recover. If they're lucky, they wake up. If they're not, they don't. Let's talk about the lack of medical care. There's no doctor on site, no trained healers, nothing resembling modern medicine. If you get hurt or sick, you're relying on folk remedies and the dubious knowledge of the older workers. Someone might have a poultice made from herbs and mud that they swear by, or a chant that's supposed to ward off infection. You're skeptical, but you're also desperate, so you let them smear their concoction on your wound and hope for the best. Infections are common and dangerous. A small cut can turn into a major problem if it gets infected. The wound swells, turns red and hot to the touch, and starts to smell funky. If it gets bad enough, the infection can spread, and then you're in real trouble. You've seen workers lose fingers, toes, even whole limbs to infection. The treatment's brutal. Someone heats a bronze knife in a fire and cuts away the infected flesh. There's no anesthetic, no pain relief. You just have to bite down on a piece of leather and scream. If you survive that, you might recover. If you don't, well, that's one less worker on the payroll. Let's talk about the noise again, because it's not just loud, it's overwhelming. The pyramid site's a cacophony of sounds that assault your ears from dawn to dusk. There's the scrape and thud of blocks being dragged, the clang of chisels on stone, the creak of wooden sledges, the shouts of foremen, the grunts and yells of workers, the bray of donkeys, the low of oxen. It's a constant, chaotic din that makes it hard to think, hard to communicate, hard to maintain your sanity. Your ears ring constantly. At the end of the day, when you finally get some quiet, there's a high-pitched whine in your ears that won't go away. It's tinnitus, from years of exposure to loud noise, and it's going to be with you for the rest of your life. You can't hear properly anymore. People have to shout to get your attention, and even then, you sometimes miss what they're saying. It's isolating, adding another layer to the loneliness you already feel. Let's talk about the boredom again, because it's worth emphasizing. The work's not mentally engaging. It's just repetitive physical labor that numbs your mind as much as it exhausts your body. You can't even daydream properly because you have to stay focused enough to avoid injury. So you just go through the motions day after day in a kind of stupor. Time loses meaning. The days blur together. You can't remember what you did yesterday or last week or last month. It's all just one endless slog of hauling and sweating and aching. The boredom's broken only by moments of fear, when a rope snaps or a block shifts or you slip on the ramp. Those moments of adrenaline are the only time you feel truly awake, truly present. The rest of the time, you're just existing, going through the motions, waiting for the day to end. Let's talk about the morning ritual of checking yourself for new injuries, because it's become as routine as breathing. You wake up, or rather, you're jolted awake by the mallet on the doorframe, and before you even try to move, you take stock. You wiggle your fingers and toes, testing to see if anything has gone numb overnight. You rotate your ankles and wrists, listening for new cracks and pops. You take a deep breath and assess which ribs are tender today. It's like a mental checklist of damage, and the list gets longer every week. Your hands are the worst. They're a mess of calluses, blisters, and half-healed splits in the skin. The calluses are so thick they're like armor, but they crack and peel, revealing raw, pink flesh underneath that stings when you flex your fingers. You've got rope burns across your palms that never fully heal because you're gripping rope again before they have a chance to. Some of your fingers don't straighten properly anymore, stuck in a permanent curl from gripping so tight for so long. You try to massage them straight, but it's painful and doesn't really work. Your shoulders feel like someone's driven stakes through them. The muscles are constantly inflamed from the repetitive pulling motion, and there's a grinding sensation in the joints that makes you wince every time you lift your arms. You've developed knots in your shoulder blades, hard lumps of knotted muscle that throb and ache. You try to press on them to release the tension, but that just hurts more, so you leave them alone and try to ignore the constant discomfort. Your back's in permanent spasm. The lower part's the worst, a band of tight, angry muscle that radiates pain down into your legs. You can't stand up straight anymore. You're permanently hunched, bent forward from months of hauling. When you try to straighten up, something in your spine grinds and catches, and the pain's so sharp it takes your breath away. So you stay bent, shuffling around like someone twice your age. Now let's talk about the marketplace that sometimes sets up near the workers' village, because it's one of the few bits of variety in your miserable routine. Traders come from the surrounding areas, setting up stalls with goods to sell or barter. The workers have very little to trade, maybe a spare tool, or a bit of extra food they've saved, or a favour owed. But the marketplace is still worth visiting, if only to see something other than limestone blocks and dust. The stalls sell things you can't afford but like to look at anyway. Fresh fruits, melons, dates, figs, pomegranates, piled up in baskets, their colours vivid and enticing. Your mouth waters just looking at them, but the prices are laughable. A single melon costs more than you earn in a week. There are also spices, bolts of linen, bronze tools, clay pots, amulets and charms. You wander through the market, looking but not touching, because the traders watch you with suspicious eyes, ready to chase off any worker who looks like trouble. Sometimes there's a stall selling ointments and remedies. The trader's usually an old woman with a face like dried leather and a voice like gravel. She's got pots of salve made from animal fat and herbs, tonics made from fermented plants, charms to ward off illness. You're tempted, but you're also skeptical. Half of it's probably useless, but the other half might actually help. You've traded a day's bread ration for a pot of ointment once, something that was supposed to help with joint pain. It smelled foul, like rotting vegetation and old fish, but you rubbed it on your knees and shoulders anyway. It didn't do much, but the rubbing motion itself felt good, so maybe it was worth it. The marketplace is also where you hear news from the outside world. The traders gossip, sharing stories from other villages, other building projects, other parts of the kingdom. You hear about floods and droughts, about political intrigues and royal decrees, about wars and treaties. None of it affects you directly, but it's a reminder that there's a world beyond the pyramid, and that's oddly comforting. You're trapped here, but the world keeps turning. Let's talk about the rare visits from priests, because they add a surreal element to the whole operation. The pyramid's a religious project, a tomb for someone important, and the priests take a keen interest in its progress. They arrive in procession, dressed in white linen so clean it practically glows, carrying staffs and incense burners. The incense smoke drifts across the site, a sweet, cloying smell that clashes with the usual stench of sweat and dust. The priests perform rituals to bless the work, chanting in a language you don't understand and making offerings to the gods. They pour libations of beer and wine onto the ground. They burn incense, they wave censers around. The workers are supposed to stop and bow respectfully, so you do, even though your back screams in protest. The priests ignore you completely, addressing their prayers to the heavens and the stones. You're just part of the background, as insignificant as the dust. Sometimes the priests inspect the work, pointing at blocks and discussing angles and alignments. They're obsessed with precision, with getting everything exactly right according to some divine plan. If something's even slightly off, they make the masons tear it down and start over. You've seen weeks of work undone because a priest decided the alignment wasn't perfect. The masons were furious, but there was nothing they could do. You can't argue with the gods, apparently. Now let's talk about the teeth problems, because they're endemic among the workers. The gritty bread wears down your teeth, and the lack of proper nutrition makes them weak. Your gums are receding, your teeth are loose, and you've got a constant low-level toothache that flares up into agony whenever you bite down wrong. You've lost 2 teeth already, molars that just crumbled and fell out one day while you were chewing bread. The gaps in your mouth make eating even more difficult, and you have to chew on one side, which makes your jaw ache. Some of the older workers are missing most of their teeth, their mouths collapsed and sunken. They gum their food, soaking the bread in beer to soften it enough to swallow. It's depressing to watch, and it's your future if you last that long. There's no dentistry, no way to fix or replace teeth. Once they're gone, and you just have to adapt. Tooth infections are common and dangerous. An infected tooth causes swelling in your jaw, fever, and intense pain that radiates through your whole head. The treatment's brutal. Someone yanks the tooth out with a pair of bronze pincers. No numbing, no pain relief, just brute force. You've heard the screams from workers undergoing this procedure, and you're terrified it'll be you next. You try to take care of your remaining teeth, rubbing them with a frayed twig to clean them, but it's not much help. Let's talk about the dust storms again, because they're truly apocalyptic when they hit. The wind picks up suddenly, coming from nowhere, and within minutes the skies turned a sickly yellow-brown. The dust cloud rolls in like a solid wall, blotting out the sun, and then you're engulfed. Visibility drops to nothing. You can't see your hand in front of your face. The wind howls, a shrieking, roaring sound that drowns out everything else. Sand and grit pelt you from all sides, stinging your skin like tiny needles. Everyone scrambles for shelter. You stumble toward your hut, arms over your face, trying to shield your eyes and mouth. The sand's everywhere, in your nose, your mouth, your ears, grinding between your teeth. You can barely breathe, each inhalation bringing in a lungful of dust that makes you cough and choke. You finally reach your hut and throw yourself inside, pulling a corner of your tunic over your face to filter the air. Let's talk about the supply boats that come up the river, because watching them arrive is one of the few interesting things that happen. The river's the lifeline of the whole operation, bringing in grain, beer, fish, and other supplies from distant regions. The boats are big, flat-bottomed vessels with sails made of woven reeds, and they're loaded down with cargo until they sit low in the water. When they dock at the supply area, there's a flurry of activity as workers unload the goods. You've been assigned to unloading duty a few times, and it's hard work, but at least it's different. You form a human chain, passing baskets and jars from hand to hand, from the boat to the storage area. The baskets are heavy and awkward, and your arms are trembling after an hour. The jars are worse, big clay amphorae filled with beer or oil, slippery and liable to shatter if you drop them. You've seen a jar slip from someone's grasp and explode on the ground, the contents spilling everywhere, and the foreman's rage was terrifying. The poor worker who dropped it was docked rations for a week. The boat crews are a different breed, river men with sun-darkened skin and weather-beaten faces. They're loud and boisterous, shouting jokes and insults at the workers as they unload. They've got a swagger to them, a freedom that you envy. They get to move around, see different places, escape the monotony of the pyramid. You watch them push off from the dock and sail away, and you feel a pang of longing so sharp it's almost painful. Now, let's talk about the firewood situation, because it's a constant challenge in a place where trees are scarce. The desert doesn't have forests, so firewood has to be brought in from elsewhere or scavenged from the sparse vegetation along the river. The communal fires in the workers' village are carefully managed, with just enough wood to cook the daily meals and nothing more. You're not allowed to have your own fire in your hut. It's too dangerous and there's not enough wood anyway. On cold nights, you long for a fire, for warmth and light and a bit of comfort. But there's none to be had. The communal fires are banked down at night to conserve fuel, leaving just a few glowing embers. You huddle on your mat, shivering, listening to your hutmates cough and snore, and you wish desperately for a fire. The lack of warmth, the lack of light, the lack of that basic human comfort, it wears you down in ways you didn't expect. Let's talk about the leather straps and wrappings you use to protect your hands, because they're your only defense against the rope. The straps are made from old animal hides, cut into strips and wound around your palms and fingers. They're stiff, scratchy, and smell like the animal they came from, but they're better than nothing. Without them, the rope would tear your hands to shreds within an hour. With them, you can last a full day, though your hands still end up raw and aching. The straps wear out quickly, and getting replacements is a hassle. You have to trade for them, or beg the supply overseer, or fashion your own from scraps. You've tried making your own from bits of worn-out linen, but linen's not tough enough, and it falls apart almost immediately. So you're dependent on the leather straps, and you guard them jealously, tucking them into your tunic at the end of each day so no one steals them. Now let's talk about the mason workers, the skilled craftsmen who actually shape and place the stones. You see them at work sometimes and you're grudgingly impressed. They've got an eye for precision that's almost uncanny, able to look at a massive block and see exactly where it needs to be trimmed to fit. They use copper chisels and wooden mallets, tapping away with a steady rhythm, and somehow they coax the hard limestone into the shapes they need. The masons don't interact much with the haulers. They're a different class, skilled workers who've trained for years. They look down on you, and you resent them for it, even though you understand the hierarchy. They've got it better, less brutal physical labour, more respect, better rations. But they've also got the pressure of precision. If they mess up, if a block's cut wrong or placed wrong, it's a disaster. You've seen masons get demoted or punished for mistakes, so maybe their job's not as enviable as it seems. Let's talk about the stonemasons' tools, because you've had a close look at them when you were hauling a load near their work area. The chisels are made of copper, which is softer than the limestone they're cutting. That seems backwards, but somehow it works. The masons strike the chisel at an angle, chipping away tiny fragments of stone bit by bit. It's slow, painstaking work that requires patience and skill you don't possess. There are also wooden wedges soaked in water, used to split blocks along natural fracture lines. The wood expands as it absorbs water, creating pressure that cracks the stone. It's clever, and you grudgingly admire the ingenuity. There are levels made from wood and string, used to ensure everything's perfectly flat and aligned. The masons are obsessed with accuracy, measuring and remeasuring, adjusting and readjusting. It's a different kind of exhausting than your work, but exhausting nonetheless. Now let's talk about the occasional fights that break out among the workers, because tempers run hot in the stress and exhaustion. Most of the time, people are too tired to fight, but every now and then, something snaps. Maybe someone accuses another of stealing food, or taking more than their share of water, or slacking off and making everyone else's work harder. Words are exchanged, voices are raised, and suddenly fists are flying. The fights are clumsy and brutal, all wild swings and grappling. No one's got the energy for a proper brawl, so it usually devolves into awkward shoving and rolling around in the dust. The other workers form a circle, watching and shouting encouragement, glad for the entertainment. The fight ends when the foremen arrive and break it up with their sticks, whacking both fighters indiscriminately. Both are given extra duties as punishment, and everyone else is warned to keep the peace. You've never been in a fight yourself. You're too cautious, too afraid of the consequences. But you've come close. There was a day when another worker shoved you hard because you'd accidentally stepped on his foot while hauling. You shoved back, and for a moment it looked like it was going to escalate. But you both realized how pointless it would be, and you backed down. You glared at each other, breathing hard, and then went back to work. The anger lingered, a hot coal in your chest, but you swallowed it down. Let's talk about the grooming habits, or lack thereof, among the workers. Personal grooming's a low priority when you're just trying to survive. Most workers have long, matted hair and unkempt beards. Some have shaved their heads to avoid the constant itching and infestation. But the shaving process is so unpleasant that many don't bother. Your own hair's a tangled mess, full of dust and bits of straw from your sleeping mat. You try to comb it occasionally, but it's a losing battle. Your beard, if you have one, is similarly neglected. It itches constantly, and it's full of dust and food particles. You scratch at it absently throughout the day, and your fingernails come away coated in grime. Some workers have taken to braiding their beards to keep them out of the way, and you've considered doing the same, but you can't be bothered. It's just another thing to worry about, and you've got enough worries already. Now let's talk about the laundry situation, because washing your clothes is a major undertaking. There's no running water, no soap, no washing machines. You take your tunic to the washing area, a stone trough filled with river water, and you dunk it in, wring it out, and repeat. The water's cold and does very little to remove the ingrained dirt and stink. You pound the tunic against the stone, trying to beat the grime out, and it helps a bit. Then you wring it out as hard as you can and hang it over a rope to dry. Let's talk about the process of getting assigned to your daily tasks, because it's a chaotic, stressful scramble every morning. After the terrible breakfast, the foremen gather everyone in the courtyard and start shouting out assignments. There's no system, no fairness. Just whoever catches their attention gets pointed at and told what to do. If you're near the front, you might get a slightly less awful job. If you're at the back, you're stuck with whatever's left, which is usually the worst tasks. You try to position yourself strategically, close enough to be noticed, but not so close that you're the first one grabbed. It's a delicate balance, and you don't always get it right. Some mornings you end up on hauling duty, which you're grimly used to. Other mornings you're sent to the quarry, which is worse, and occasionally you're assigned to rubble clearing or latrine maintenance, which are the absolute bottom of the barrel. You never know what you're going to get, and the uncertainty adds an extra layer of stress to the already miserable routine. The foremen play favourites, of course, workers who've been here longer or who've proven themselves particularly strong or reliable get the better assignments. You're still relatively new, which means you're at the mercy of whatever the foremen feel like dishing out. You've tried sucking up, nodding eagerly when they bark orders, doing extra work without complaint, but it doesn't seem to make a difference. You're just another faceless labourer in an endless sea of them. Now let's talk about the smell of the animals, because it's truly overpowering. The donkeys and oxen are kept in pens overnight, and by morning the pens are thick with droppings and stale urine. The smell's a physical presence, a thick, ammonia-laden stench that makes your eyes water and your stomach turn. When you're assigned to work with the animals, you have to wade through this mess, and it's as unpleasant as it sounds. The animals themselves reek of sweat, manure, and something musty that's hard to describe. When you're walking beside an ox, guiding it along a supply route, you're enveloped in its smell. It gets in your nose, your mouth, your clothes, and it clings to you for the rest of the day. You become nose-blind to it eventually. But when you first start working with the animals, it's nauseating. You've seen new workers retch and gag, bending over with their hands on their knees, trying not to be sick. The foremen just laugh and tell them to toughen up. Let's talk about the leather sandals some of the better off workers have, because you covet them desperately. Your reed sandals are constantly falling apart, offering almost no protection, but leather sandals are durable and comfortable. The workers who have them guard them fiercely, never leaving them unattended. You've thought about saving up to trade for a pair, but the cost's prohibitive. A pair of leather sandals would take months of saved rations, and you can't afford to go hungry for that long. You've tried improvising, wrapping strips of cloth around your feet for extra padding, but it doesn't help much. The cloth gets dirty and wet, and then it just bunches up uncomfortably inside your sandals. You've resigned yourself to a lifetime of broken, inadequate footwear, just one more indignity in a long list. Now let's talk about the river itself, because it's a constant presence on the horizon, a shimmering blue line that represents water, life, and escape. You can see it from the pyramid site, tantalizingly close but completely out of reach during working hours. On your rare rest days, some workers make the trek down to the river to wash and cool off. You've done it a few times and it's glorious. The water's cool and refreshing, a shocking contrast to the relentless heat. You wade in up to your waist, feeling the current tug at your legs, and you duck under, letting the water wash away days of accumulated grime. You come up gasping, water streaming from your hair and face, and for a moment you feel almost human again. The relief's short-lived. You know you'll be covered in dust and sweat again within hours, but it's worth it for that brief moment of cleanliness. The river's also dangerous. There are crocodiles, massive reptiles that lurk in the shallows, waiting for prey. You've seen them, their knobby heads breaking the surface, their eyes watching. You give them a wide berth, staying in the areas where the water's too shallow for them to maneuver. Even so, there's always a frisson of fear when you're in the water, a nagging worry that something is going to grab your leg and drag you under. It's happened to workers before, and the stories are enough to keep you cautious. Let's talk about the supply overseers, the bureaucrats who manage the distribution of food and materials. They're petty tyrants, drunk on their tiny bit of power, and they make everything more difficult than it needs to be. They sit in their shaded offices, making notes on papyrus, and they decide who gets what and when. If they like you, you might get a slightly larger portion of bread. If they don't, you might find your rations mysteriously short. You've learned to be obsequiously polite to the overseers, bowing and scraping and thanking them profusely for the meagre rations they dole out. It galls you to grovel, but it's necessary. The overseers have the power to make your life even more miserable than it already is, and you can't afford to antagonize them, so you swallow your pride, you smile through gritted teeth, and you say whatever they want to hear. Now let's talk about the itching, because it's constant and maddening. You've got bites from fleas and mosquitoes, rashes from the rough linen and friction, fungal infections, dry skin and sunburn, all contributing to a full-body itch that never lets up. You scratch constantly without even thinking about it, and your skin's covered in red marks and scabs from where you've scratched too hard. The worst is at night, when you're trying to sleep. The itching seems to intensify in the darkness, every bite and rash clamoring for attention. You scratch until you're sore, but it doesn't help. The relief's temporary, lasting only seconds before the itch returns with renewed intensity. You've tried lying on your hands to stop yourself from scratching, but then you just squirm and rub against the reed mat trying to get relief. It's torture, and it robs you of what little rest you might otherwise get. Let's talk about the bruises that cover your body, because you're one big collection of them. Your shoulders are bruised from the rope digging in. Your shins are bruised from banging into blocks. Your arms are bruised from being jostled in the work gangs. Your back's bruised from the foreman's stick. The bruises bloom in shades of purple, blue, green and yellow, a grotesque rainbow mapped across your skin. Some of the bruises are so deep they hurt to touch. You press on them gingerly, wincing at the tender spots, and you wonder if something's broken underneath. But there's no way to know, and no treatment even if there were. You just have to wait for them to heal, which takes weeks, and by then, you've got a fresh crop of bruises to replace them. Now, let's talk about the smoke from the cooking fires, because it's another constant irritant. The communal ovens belch out thick smoke all day long, and it hangs over the workers' village in a grey pall. The smoke gets in your eyes, making them stream and sting. It gets in your lungs, making you cough. It permeates everything, your clothes, your hair, your sleeping mat, so you're never free of the acrid, choking smell. The smoke's thick with particles from the burning wood and dried dung used as fuel. Yes, dried animal droppings are used for fuel because wood's scarce. The smell's distinctive, earthy and pungent, and it adds another layer to the general miasma of unpleasant odours you live with. You're so used to it that you barely notice anymore, but when you do catch a whiff, it's enough to turn your stomach. Let's talk about the way your hands shake in the morning, a fine tremor that you can't control. It's from exhaustion, from overworked muscles, from damaged nerves. You hold out your hands and watch them quiver, and you wonder how much more your body can take. The shaking makes it hard to grip things, hard to tie the leather straps around your palms, hard to eat without dropping your food. You clench and unclench your fists, trying to steady them, but it doesn't work. The tremor's there until you've warmed up and started working, and even then, it sometimes comes back during breaks. The other workers have the same problem. You're all standing around in the morning with shaking hands, looking like a group of nervous wrecks, which, to be fair, is exactly what you are. The foremen don't care about the shaking, they just want you to get to work, tremors or not. So you wrap your hands as best you can, pick up the rope with fingers that won't quite cooperate, and start another day. Now let's talk about the weird rashes that pop up in the most uncomfortable places. The combination of sweat, friction and dirt creates perfect conditions for skin problems. You've got a rash in your groin that's red, angry and burns like fire. Walking's uncomfortable, sitting's worse, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. You've tried washing the area with water, but it doesn't help. The rash just persists, a constant source of discomfort that you can't escape or ignore. Other workers have similar problems. There's a lot of awkward shifting and adjusting going on, workers trying to find positions that don't aggravate their various rashes and sores. No one talks about it, it's too embarrassing, but everyone knows. The collective discomfort creates a strange sort of solidarity, a shared suffering that goes unspoken but understood. Let's talk about the way the wind sometimes picks up in the afternoon, a hot, dry wind that blows across the desert. It doesn't provide relief, it's not a cooling breeze. Instead, it's like standing in front of an oven with the door open. The wind's hot enough to dry the sweat on your skin almost instantly, leaving behind a salty crust. It whips up dust and sand, flinging it into your face, your eyes, your mouth. You turn your back to the wind and hunch over, trying to shield yourself, but there's no real escape. The hot wind makes the work even harder. You're already struggling with the heat, and now you've got this furnace blast hitting you. Your mouth gets so dry, your tongue sticks to the roof of your mouth. Your eyes feel gritty and sore. Your skin's tight and uncomfortable, baked and scoured by the wind and sand. You dream of rain, of cool breezes, of anything other than this relentless, punishing climate. Now let's talk about the accidents you've witnessed that still haunt you. There was the worker who fell from a ramp, tumbling down and landing with a sickening crunch. He didn't get up. Workers rushed over, but it was clear he was gone, his body twisted at an unnatural angle. They carried him away on a stretcher covered with a sheet, and work continued. No one spoke about it. There was no memorial, no moment of silence. Just a brief pause, and then everyone went back to hauling. There was the worker whose foot was crushed when a block shifted. The sound of the bones breaking echoed across the site, and his screams went on until someone managed to lever the block off him. His foot was mangled, completely destroyed, and he was carried away howling. You don't know what happened to him after that. He never came back, and no one mentions him. It's like he never existed. These images stick with you, playing in your mind when you're trying to sleep. You see the falling body, the crushed foot, the twisted limbs. You hear the screams, and you think, that could be me. That could be me tomorrow, or next week, or today. The fear's always there, a cold knot in your stomach that never quite goes away. Let's talk about the salt that encrusts your skin by the end of each day. You sweat out so much moisture that salt crystals form on your skin, white and crusty. You can scrape them off with your fingernails, leaving little piles of salt. It's bizarre and unpleasant, and it makes your skin feel tight and itchy. When you finally manage to wash, the water stings the salt-crusted areas, a sharp, unpleasant sensation that makes you hiss through your teeth. The salt gets into the cracks in your lips, the cuts on your hands, the raw patches on your body. Everywhere you've got broken skin, the salt finds it and makes it burn. It's just one more layer of discomfort, one more thing to endure in the endless catalogue of physical misery. Now let's talk about the foreman's whistle, that bone whistle that signals breaks and shift changes. The sound's shrill and piercing, cutting through all the other noise on the site. You've come to hate that whistle with a passion. When it signals the start of a shift, your heart sinks. When it signals the end of a break, you want to weep. The only time you're happy to hear it is at the end of the day, when it means you can finally stop. The whistles become a Pavlovian trigger. Hearing it makes your stomach clench with dread, even when you're not at the work site. Sometimes you hear something that sounds like it, a bird call, a piece of wood creaking, and you flinch, your body tensing in anticipation of more work. It's embedded in your psyche, a sound that represents authority and compulsion and the denial of rest. Let's talk about the way you've stopped caring about your appearance. In the beginning, you tried to keep yourself relatively clean and presentable. You washed when you could, you tried to comb your hair, you made an effort. But over time, you've given up. What's the point? You're going to be covered in dust and sweat within an hour of starting work anyway. So you've let yourself go, and now you're as grimy and unkempt as everyone else. Your reflection in the water trough's shocking when you catch a glimpse of it. You barely recognize yourself. Your face is gaunt, your eyes are sunken and hollow, your skin's dark and weathered. You look decades older than you are. You look like a broken, beaten man, which is exactly what you are. The recognition's sobering, and you quickly look away, not wanting to see what you've become. Now let's talk about the gambling that goes on during rest periods, because some workers are always trying to win extra rations or favors. They play simple games of chance, tossing knuckle bones, guessing which hand holds a pebble, drawing marked sticks from a pile. The stakes are usually food, a chunk of bread or a dried fish, but sometimes they bet days off or swaps of work assignments. You've never participated, you can't afford to lose what little you have, and you don't trust your luck. But you watch sometimes, and it's fascinating in a grim way. The desperation in the players' eyes, the way they clutch their meager winnings, the dejection of the losers who've just gambled away tomorrow's meal. It's depressing, but it's also a distraction, and distractions are valuable. Let's talk about the way sound carries in the desert night. When darkness falls and the work stops, the sight becomes eerily quiet, and in that quiet sound travels for incredible distances. You can hear conversations from huts far away, the bark of dogs, the bray of a donkey, the crackle of a dying fire. It's disorienting, lying on your mat in the dark, listening to disembodied voices and noises drifting across the night. Sometimes you hear singing, mournful tunes that echo across the village. Sometimes you hear arguing, voices raised in anger. Sometimes you hear sobbing, the sound of someone who's reached their breaking point. You lie there and listen, and you feel a strange kinship with these unseen people, all suffering together in the darkness. Let's talk about the way your stomach's constantly unsettled, a low-grade nausea that never quite goes away. The combination of poor quality food, contaminated water, physical exhaustion and stress keeps your digestive system in a perpetual state of distress. You're bloated and gassy, your stomach gurgling and cramping at random intervals. You burp frequently, bringing up the taste of onions and fermented grain, and the taste lingers unpleasantly in your mouth. Sometimes the nausea gets worse, a roiling sensation that makes you think you're going to be sick. You swallow hard, trying to keep everything down, because you can't afford to lose what little food you've managed to eat. The nausea passes eventually, but it always comes back. It's another constant discomfort, another thing your body's doing wrong, another reminder that you're barely holding it together. Now let's talk about the rope burns that never heal, because you're gripping rope every day and the wounds don't get a chance to close. Your palms are a mess of raw, weeping patches where the skin's been rubbed away. The leather straps help, but they don't completely prevent the damage. New burns form over old ones, creating layers of injury that go deeper and deeper. The pain's intense, a burning, stinging sensation that makes you want to cry out every time you grip the rope. You've tried wrapping your hands more carefully, doubling up on the leather, but it only helps marginally. The fundamental problem is that you're doing work your hands weren't designed for, day after day, with no chance to heal. So the burns persist, and you just have to grit your teeth and bear it. The pain becomes background noise, always there, always aching, blending with all the other pains into one generalized misery. Let's talk about the way you fantasize about food constantly. Your waking thoughts are dominated by images of meals you'll never have. You imagine roasted duck, the skin crispy and glistening with fat, the meat tender and succulent. You imagine fresh bread, still warm from the oven, soft and fluffy and utterly unlike the gritty, dense loaves you actually eat. You imagine fruit, dates, figs, melons, grapes, so fresh and ripe that juice runs down your chin when you bite into them. These fantasies are vivid and detailed, and they're a form of torture. Your mouth waters, your stomach clenches with hunger, and the reality of your next meal, more bread, more onions, more watery stew, is crushingly disappointing. You know you're just making it harder on yourself by fantasizing, but you can't stop. The fantasy's the only pleasure you have, even if it makes the reality worse. Now let's talk about the splinters, because you're constantly getting them from the wooden sledges, levers and tools. They're tiny but incredibly painful, jabbing into your fingers, palms and sometimes your feet when you're walking barefoot near the work area. You try to dig them out with your fingernails or a sharp stone, but they're often embedded too deep. So they stay there, festering, your body slowly pushing them out over days or weeks. Some splinters get infected, the area around them swelling up and becoming hot and tender. You press on the swollen area, trying to squeeze the splinter out, and sometimes it works, a tiny shard of wood emerging along with a bit of discharge. Other times the splinter just stays there, a constant source of pain and irritation. You've got several in your hands right now. You can feel them when you flex your fingers, tiny points of sharp discomfort. Let's talk about the foreman's inspections, which happen periodically and are always stressful. A head overseer or official comes to check on progress, and the foremen get nervous, which means they take it out on you. For days before an inspection, you're driven harder than usual, working longer hours, moving more blocks. All so everything looks perfect when the official arrives. During the inspection itself, you're expected to keep working at full intensity, while also staying out of the way and not making any mistakes. It's impossible to do both, and inevitably something goes wrong. Maybe a rope's not perfectly aligned, or a block's moved too slowly, or someone stumbles. The foremen explode with rage, shouting and whacking people with sticks, trying to demonstrate to the official that they're in control and won't tolerate sloppiness. You keep your head down and pray you don't become the example. Now let's talk about the despair that creeps in during the darkest moments, usually late at night when you can't sleep. The hopelessness of your situation becomes overwhelming. You're trapped here, your body's breaking down, and there's no escape. This is your life until you collapse or die, and then you'll be forgotten, replaced by another worker, just another nameless body that contributed to the pyramid. The despair's heavy, suffocating, pressing down on your chest until you can barely breathe. You lie in the darkness, staring at nothing, and you wonder what the point is. Why keep going? Why endure another day of suffering? But you don't have an answer, and when morning comes, you get up anyway, because that's what you do. You survive because you don't know how to do anything else. Let's talk about the clouds of flies that swarm around the latrine trench and the animal pens. They're everywhere. thick black clouds that buzz and swirl. They land on you constantly, crawling over your skin, getting into your ears and nose. You swat at them reflexively, but there are always more. They're attracted to the smell of sweat and dirt, and since you're always sweaty and dirty, they follow you around like a personal entourage. The flies also land on your food, and there's no way to stop them. You wave them away, but they just circle and land again the moment you stop waving. So you end up eating bread that's been walked on by flies, drinking beer that's had flies floating in it. It's disgusting, but you're too hungry and thirsty to care. You just pick out the dead flies and carry on eating. Now let's talk about the ache in your jaw from grinding your teeth at night. The stress and anxiety manifest physically, and you clench your jaw so hard in your sleep that your teeth wear down and your jaw muscles are constantly sore. You wake up with a headache centered in your temples, and your jaw's so tight you can barely open your mouth. You massage the muscles, trying to loosen them, but they're rock-hard knots that resist your efforts. The teeth grinding's also making your teeth loose. You can feel them wiggle slightly when you press on them with your tongue, and you know it's only a matter of time before you lose more of them. But you can't stop grinding. It happens when you're asleep, beyond your conscious control. So your jaw aches, your teeth loosen, and it's just another problem you have to live with. Let's talk about the foreman's favourites, the workers who've somehow managed to ingratiate themselves and get better treatment. They get the easier jobs, the extra rations, the occasional day off. You resent them, even though you know it's not really their fault. They've just figured out how to work the system, how to suck up effectively, how to be useful to the foreman in ways that go beyond just hauling blocks. You've tried to become a favourite yourself, but it hasn't worked. Maybe you're not obsequious enough, or maybe you just don't have the right personality. Either way, you're stuck with the regular treatment, which is to say, no special considerations, no breaks, just endless work. You watch the favourites getting their perks, and you feel a mix of envy and contempt, but mostly you just feel tired. Now let's talk about the smell of your own body, which has become inescapable. You reek of sweat, old and new, layered and fermented into a pungent stench. You smell of dust and clay, of smoke and animals, of the latrine trench and the river. You smell of exhaustion and desperation, a funk that's uniquely yours but also identical to every other worker's. You've become nose-blind to most of it, but occasionally you catch a whiff of yourself and you're repulsed. Let's talk about the way time seems to slow down during the worst moments of work. When you're hauling a particularly heavy block up a steep ramp, every second stretches into an eternity. You pull, step, and each movement feels like it takes forever. Your muscles scream, your lungs burn, and you're convinced this moment is never going to end. The foreman's chant becomes a meaningless drone, and you lose yourself in the repetitive motion, your mind going blank from exhaustion. And then suddenly, the block's in position. The moment's over. Time snaps back to normal, and you're gulping air, your legs trembling, wondering how you survived. But there's no time to recover because there's another block waiting, and the whole agonizing process starts again. The way time dilates during extreme effort is disorienting, making the workday feel both endless and weirdly compressed. Now let's talk about the chafing in your armpits and between your thighs, because the constant movement and the rough linen create friction points that become raw and tender. The skin's rubbed away, leaving patches that are red, angry, and painful. Every step, every arm movement causes a sharp sting. You try to adjust your tunic to minimize the rubbing, but there's no configuration that doesn't cause problems somewhere. You've seen other workers walking with their arms held slightly away from their bodies or with a bow-legged gait, and you know it's because they're dealing with the same chafing. It's a ridiculous sight, all these grown men walking like they've got something stuck in unfortunate places. But there's nothing funny about the pain, a constant burning that makes every movement a fresh torment. Let's talk about the supply shortages that hit without warning when the boats don't arrive, or the harvest's been diverted elsewhere. Suddenly the already meagre rations are cut even further. The bread portions shrink, the beer's watered down even more, and there's no supplementary food at all. Your hunger, which was already a constant companion, becomes a gnawing beast that consumes your thoughts. During these shortages, the mood in the workers' village turns ugly. People get desperate, hoarding what little food they have, stealing from each other. There are more fights, more arguments, more suspicion and paranoia. The foremen crack down hard, trying to maintain order, but their own rations are probably affected too, and they're just as irritable as everyone else. The entire site becomes a pressure cooker of hunger and resentment, and you pray for the supply boats to arrive before things explode. Now, let's talk about the way your breathing's become laboured, a constant wheezing that gets worse with exertion. Your lungs are damaged from all the dust, and they can't process oxygen efficiently anymore. You're constantly out of breath, gasping and panting like you've just run a race, even when you're just walking. The other workers sound the same, a collective wheeze and rattle that's like music from a broken organ. Climbing the ramps is especially brutal. The incline plus the exertion plus the damaged lungs equals agony. You're sucking in air desperately, your chest heaving, spots dancing in your vision. You feel like you're drowning in air, unable to get enough oxygen no matter how hard you breathe. And you have to keep moving, keep climbing, because stopping means getting yelled at or whacked. So you push through, your body screaming in protest, and somehow you make it to the top. Let's talk about the morning stiffness that makes getting up a slow, painful process. Your body's seized up overnight, all your joints locked and aching. You have to ease yourself up slowly, wincing as everything creaks and protests. It takes several minutes of careful movement before you can stand upright, and even then, you're moving like someone 3 times your age. The stiffness eases once you've been moving for a while, but those first few minutes are torture. You've developed a morning routine to manage the stiffness. You start by wiggling your fingers and toes, getting the blood flowing. Then you carefully roll onto your side and push yourself up to sitting. You sit for a moment, breathing through the pain, before attempting to stand. It's a slow, deliberate process, and you've gotten good at it through necessity. But it's depressing that this is now your normal, that you can't just hop out of bed like a normal person. Now let's talk about the foreman's mood swings, because they're unpredictable and make everything more stressful. Some days, a foreman's in a relatively good mood, and he's lenient, turning a blind eye to brief rests and not shouting quite as much. Other days, the same foreman's in a foul temper, and he's looking for any excuse to yell and hit. You never know which version you're going to get, and that uncertainty keeps you on edge. You've learned to read the subtle signs, a foreman's body language, the tone of his voice, the way he grips his stick. If he's in a bad mood, you make yourself as invisible as possible, blending into the group, avoiding eye contact. If he seems calm, you might risk a moment's rest or a sip of water. It's a constant calculation, trying to anticipate their moods and adjust your behavior accordingly. Let's talk about the dead workers whose names you never learned. They were just faces in the crowd, bodies hauling ropes, and then one day, they weren't there anymore. Maybe they got injured and couldn't work. Maybe they got sick and died. Maybe they just disappeared, and no one knows what happened. The turnover's constant, new workers arriving to replace the ones who leave, and you can't keep track of them all. You've stopped learning names unless you're working directly with someone for an extended period. It's too depressing to befriend someone only to have them vanish. So you keep your distance, offering help when needed, but not forming attachments. It's a lonely way to live, but it's safer for your sanity. The anonymous dead pile up in your memory, a faceless mass of suffering that mirrors your own. Now let's talk about the leather water pouches that some workers have, which you desperately want but can't afford. These pouches can be slung over your shoulder or tied to your waist, providing personal water that you can sip throughout the day. The workers who have them are the envy of everyone else, able to drink whenever they need, without waiting for the communal break. You've tried making your own from scraps of cloth, but cloth leaks and the water's gone within an hour. You've considered trading for a pouch, but they're expensive. A leather water pouch costs several weeks' worth of rations, and you can't afford to go hungry for that long. So you remain dependent on the communal water jars, waiting in line with everyone else, rationing your sips and always being thirsty. The workers with pouches don't share, and you don't blame them. Resources are scarce, and everyone's looking out for themselves. Let's talk about the way your fingernails have become thick and discoloured, yellowed and brittle from constant abuse. They're cracked and split, with dirt packed underneath that you can never quite clean out. Some of them have separated from the nail bed, partially torn off from catching on rope or wood. They're painful and ugly, and you've given up any hope of them ever looking normal again. You've lost a couple of fingernails entirely, ripped off in accidents. The exposed nail beds were exquisitely painful, raw and sensitive. You wrapped them as best you could and kept working, because what else could you do? Eventually the nails grew back, but they came in deformed, thick and ridged. Your hands look like they belong to some sort of creature, not a human, and you've stopped looking at them if you can help it. Let's talk about the way the other workers have started to look less like people and more like walking shadows. Everyone's so worn down, so gaunt and exhausted, that you're all starting to resemble each other. Hollow-eyed, hollow-cheeked, moving with the same slow, pained shuffle. You sometimes catch yourself staring at a worker and realizing you don't know if you've seen them before or if they just look like everyone else. The individuality's been worn away, leaving only the uniform misery. You wonder if you look the same to them. Probably. You're all interchangeable parts in this massive machine, and the machine's grinding you down into identical components. The thought's depressing. The loss of identity, the reduction to just another body hauling blocks. But there's no energy to dwell on existential questions. You just keep moving, keep surviving, keep being one more anonymous worker in the endless crowd. Now let's talk about the way your sense of taste has dulled from the repetitive diet. The bread tastes like gritty nothing. The onions have lost their punch. Even the beers become just another texture passing through your mouth. You chew and swallow mechanically, not really tasting, just getting the fuel into your body. When you do occasionally get something different, a bit of fish, a handful of dates, the flavors are overwhelming, almost too much for your deadened palate. You've bitten your tongue and cheeks multiple times while eating, not from accidents, but from lack of coordination. You're so tired that even the simple act of chewing becomes fraught. You bite down wrong, your teeth catching the inside of your cheek, and you taste the metallic tang that signals you've broken skin. You wince, probe the injury with your tongue, and keep eating because you can't afford to waste food. Let's talk about the damp spots on the walls of your hut where moisture seeps through. The mud bricks aren't completely waterproof, and when there's any moisture in the air, dew, the occasional rain, the humidity from the river, It soaks through and creates dark, damp patches. These spots grow fuzzy white mold that spreads across the wall. The mold has a musty, unpleasant smell that adds to the general funk of the hut. You've tried scraping the mold off, but it just grows back within days. The dampness and the organic matter in the mud bricks create perfect conditions for it. You're breathing in mold spores every night, and you're pretty sure it's contributing to your breathing problems. But there's nothing you can do about it short of rebuilding the entire hut, which isn't an option. So you live with the mold, just one more health hazard in a long list. Now let's talk about the way the foreman used threats of reassignment to keep you in line. There are worse jobs than hauling blocks. Much worse. Quarry work in the deepest pits, where the air's choked with dust and the sun doesn't penetrate. Latrine maintenance, which is self-explanatory. Foundation digging in the hardest, rockiest ground. The foremen dangle these reassignments like swords over your head, and the threat's effective. You keep your mouth shut, you work hard, you don't complain, because you don't want to end up in one of those positions. You've seen workers reassigned as punishment, and they come back, if they come back, broken. The quarry workers develop a chronic cough within weeks, hacking up chalky phlegm constantly. The latrine workers smell so bad they're avoided by everyone, the stench having soaked into their skin. The digging crews are covered in cuts and bruises from breaking rock with inadequate tools. The threat of becoming one of them is enough to keep you compliant. Let's talk about the sound the blocks make when they slide into place. A deep, grinding scrape followed by a solid thunk. It's oddly satisfying, that final sound of success after hours of brutal effort. The block's where it needs to be, your job for that load is done, and there's a brief moment of accomplishment before you turn to face the next block. That thunk is one of the few positive sounds in your day, a rare moment where something's actually completed. But the satisfaction's fleeting, gone almost as soon as you register it, because there's always another block, another ramp, another day. The pyramid's massive, and your contribution's infinitesimal. That one block you just placed is one of hundreds of thousands, and the structure's nowhere near finished. Your moment of accomplishment dissolves into the overwhelming realization of how much more there is to do, and the brief satisfaction curdles into despair. Now let's talk about the traders who occasionally pass through, offering to buy or trade for anything valuable the workers might have. They're opportunists, looking to exploit desperate men, offering unfair trades and laughable prices. A tool that cost you weeks of rations, they'll offer a few days' worth of food for. A serviceable pair of sandals, they'll trade for a mouldy loaf of bread. You know you're being cheated, but sometimes you're desperate enough to take the deal anyway. You traded away a bronze chisel once, a tool you'd found and kept hidden. The trader gave you a small clay pot of oil for your lamp and a piece of dried fish. It wasn't a fair trade, the chisel was worth far more, but you needed the oil and the fish, and you had no other way to get them. You watched the trader walk away with your chisel, knowing you'd been swindled, and you felt a mix of shame and resignation. That's just how things work. Let's talk about the way your back's developed a permanent curve, hunched forward from months of pulling and lifting. You can't straighten up properly anymore, the muscles and spine having adapted to the constant forward lean. When you try to stand upright, it's painful and feels wrong. You're stuck in this hunched posture, and you look decades older than you are. The other workers are the same, all of you bent and twisted, your bodies reshaped by the work. The hunch creates its own problems. Your neck's constantly strained from having to look up while your body's bent forward. Your shoulders are pulled forward, creating a tightness across your upper back. Your balance is off, and you stumble more easily. The deformation's probably permanent. Even if you stopped working tomorrow, you'd never stand straight again. Your body's been remolded into a shape fit only for labor, and that's what it'll remain. Now let's talk about the way the stars look at night, because on the rare, clear evenings when you're not too exhausted to look up, they're spectacular. The desert sky, free from any artificial light, is a blanket of stars so dense it's almost overwhelming. You can see the Milky Way stretching across the heavens, a river of light. You can see planets, bright and steady, and shooting stars that streak across the darkness. Looking at the stars gives you a strange feeling, something between awe and insignificance. The universe is vast and uncaring, and you're just a tiny speck of suffering on its surface. Your pain, your struggle, your life, none of it matters in the grand scheme. It's a depressing realization, but also oddly comforting. If nothing matters, then maybe the suffering doesn't matter either. You lie there, staring up at the infinite expanse, and for a moment you feel untethered from your misery. Let's talk about the foreman's sticks, those implements of correction that are never far from their hands. They're made from hard wood, cut straight and smooth, heavy enough to hurt, but not so heavy they're unwieldy. The foremen tap them against their palms or the ground, a constant reminder of their authority. The sound of wood striking wood is a warning, and you've learned to flinch at it instinctively. Let's talk about the moment when you realize you've stopped being surprised by the pain. It's just there, a constant background hum that you've learned to tune out. Your hands hurt, your back hurts, your feet hurt, your head hurts. Everything hurts, all the time, and you've adapted. The pain no longer shocks you or demands your attention. It's just part of existence, like breathing or being thirsty. This realization is both liberating and horrifying, because it means you've accepted this as normal, and that acceptance feels like a kind of death. You move through your days in a fog of discomfort that you barely register anymore. Only when the pain spikes, a new injury, a fresh rope burn, a particularly hard blow from a foreman's stick, do you really notice it? The rest of the time, it's just noise, and you've learned to function through it. You're not sure if this is resilience or just complete breakdown of your ability to process suffering. Probably both. Now let's talk about the way you've started to measure your life in blocks moved. Not in days or weeks, but in how many blocks you've hauled today, this week, since you arrived. You've lost count, but the numbers are staggering. Thousands of blocks, each one a monument to your suffering. If someone asked you how long you've been here, you wouldn't know the answer in terms of time, but you could tell them roughly how many blocks you've moved. Your life's become a tally of stones shifted, each one identical to the last, each one meaningless on its own, but adding up to something you'll never live to see completed. The blocks blur together in your memory. You can't remember individual hauls, they're all the same, but the cumulative weight of them, the total tonnage you've moved with your body, would be impossible to calculate. If you could somehow quantify your suffering in terms of stone shifted, it would be a mountain. And for what? So some wealthy person can have an elaborate tomb. The injustice of it would be funny if it weren't so crushing. Let's talk about the foreman you actually respect, because there is one. He's fair as anyone can be in this system. He doesn't hit unless absolutely necessary. He allows water breaks when he can, and he actually seems to see the workers as people rather than just tools. You've been in his work gang a few times, and those days are marginally less awful than usual. He remembers names. He notices when someone's struggling and adjusts the team to compensate, and he doesn't shout unless there's a real problem. This foreman's an anomaly, and you're not sure how he's maintained his humanity in this place. Most foremen become callous and cruel, but he's held onto some essential decency. You're grateful for it, even though his kindness can't fundamentally change the brutality of the work. A kind overseer is still an overseer, and you're still hauling blocks in the desert heat until your body gives out. But those slightly easier days under his supervision are precious, small mercies in an ocean of suffering. Now, let's talk about the wild birds you sometimes see, and how you envy their freedom. A hawk circling overhead, riding the thermals effortlessly. A flock of small birds wheeling and diving, moving as one. They can go wherever they want, whenever they want. They're not bound to this place, not trapped in this cycle of labour and exhaustion. You watch them with a longing so intense it's physical, wishing desperately that you could sprout wings and fly away from all of this. The birds are indifferent to the pyramid, to the workers, to the whole massive enterprise. They land on the blocks sometimes, perching and preening, completely unconcerned. They shit on the stones you've just hauled into place, white splashes that dry in the sun. It's almost insulting, their casual dismissal of all this effort. But you can't blame them. They're just living their lives, free and unencumbered. You'd do the same if you could. Let's talk about the way you've forgotten what it feels like to be clean. Really clean, not just slightly less dirty. Clean skin, clean hair, clean clothes, the absence of grime and stench. It's been so long that you can't quite remember the sensation. You have a vague recollection that it was pleasant, but the specifics have faded. You're not even sure what you'd do with true cleanliness if you had it. Would you know how to maintain it? Would it feel strange and uncomfortable after all this time? The concept of hygiene has become theoretical, something that exists for other people in other places, not for you. You're permanently grimy, and that's just how it is. The best you can hope for is to be slightly less disgusting than yesterday, and even that's not always achievable. You've made peace with being filthy, the same way you've made peace with pain and hunger and exhaustion. It's just another aspect of your degraded existence. Now let's talk about the supply cart that overturned once, spilling its load of bread across the dusty ground. For a moment, there was chaos. Workers broke ranks and scrambled for the fallen loaves, grabbing what they could before the foreman restored order. You got 2 extra pieces of bread, dusty and slightly crushed, and you guarded them jealously for the rest of the day. That unexpected windfall felt like a miracle, a tiny stroke of luck in a sea of misfortune. The foremen were furious about the scramble, shouting about discipline and order, but they couldn't undo what had happened. The workers who grabbed bread had already eaten it or hidden it away. There were punishments. Some workers were assigned to extra duties, but it was worth it for those extra calories. That incident's one of your few positive memories from this place, a moment when you got something more than you were supposed to have. Let's talk about the limestone dust that settled into every crevice of your body. It's in your ears, in your nostrils, in the folds of your skin. You can feel it, gritty and irritating, no matter how much you wash. It's become part of you, a layer of mineral coating your flesh. When you sweat, the dust mixes with the moisture and forms a paste that dries into a hard crust. You're slowly being transformed into stone yourself, encrusted with the same material you're hauling. In a strange way, it feels appropriate. You're building a monument of stone, and you're becoming stone yourself. The boundary between you and the blocks is blurring. You're just another material being used in the construction, organic material that will wear out and be discarded, but material nonetheless. The thought's grim but also oddly fitting. You're not a person anymore, not really. You're a component, and components don't need dignity or comfort or hope. Now let's talk about the end of your time here, because it's coming whether you acknowledge it or not. Your body's failing. You can feel it, the way things don't work quite right anymore, the way simple tasks have become difficult, the way your breathing's more laboured every day. You're not going to recover from this. The damage is permanent and accumulating. One day, maybe soon, maybe in a few months, your body's just going to give out. Your heart will stop, or your lungs will fail, or you'll collapse and not get up. You don't think about it much because dwelling on your impending decline is too depressing. But sometimes, in the quiet moments, you acknowledge it. This is a death sentence, delivered slowly, one block at a time. You're dying here, in the desert, building something you'll never see completed, and no one will remember you. There won't be a grave with your name, no memorial, no recognition. You'll just disappear, and another worker will take your place, and the machine will grind on.